Okay, good Vach. Tonight's shir is to the full Shlema recovery of Shalom Dave Ber Ben Chava. No, I don't know who he is, but I got an email saying they should commit our miftayim and the classes and stuff to him. He's a recovery, so we're gonna tonight's class next year will be in his merit. Should have a full Shlema immediately. Okay, so last minute I decided to start the shir in a very interesting way, but just bear with me. So I'm going to start off with a mimer. Start with a mimer from the Rebbe, famous Hanukkah mimer. Hanukkah is coming up. I'm literally going to read the first little small chunk of the mimer. It's a mimer from, the Rebbe said this in 1977. Yeah? It starts like this. Tonu Rabbanon mitzvahs ner Chanukah chulu. So the Chachamim taught us that the mitzvah of Chanukah, there's an argument about it. Beis Shammai is the opinion, says, Yom Rishon madlik shmoine, mikan ve'elach poiches v'hoilech. Yeah, Beis Shammai is of the opinion that how do you light Chanukah candles? On the first night, you light 8 candles. Second night, you light 7 candles. Third night, you light 6, and so on and so forth, till the last night, you light 1 candle. Well, Beis Hillel says, Yom Rishon madlik achas mikan ve'elach poiches v'hoilech. Beis Hillel argues and says, no, night number 1, you light 1 candle. Night number 2, you light 2 candles. Night number 8, you light 8 candles. And that is lahalacha. That's what we do. We rule like Beis Hillel. Now, what's the reason why they each say something different? So, time of the Beis Shammai keneged parei hachag, v'time of the Beis Hillel d'mayla b'kodesh chulu. The reason of Beis Shammai is because it corresponds to the cows of Sukkos. And the reason of Beis Hillel is because we rise in holiness. Okay, so what are the cows of Sukkot? So on Sukkot in the Beis Hamikdash, they would bring every day of the 7 days of Sukkot, they would bring a number of karbonis, specifically for Sukkot. On day 1 of Sukkot, they would bring 13. Day 2, they would bring 12. Day 3, they would bring 11, and so on and so forth. Till the last day, they would bring 7. If I'm not mistaken on the numbers. In other words, they would go down. That was the way it was done. So corresponding to the way it worked in the Beis Hamikdash on Sukkot, we light, the Beis Shammai says we have to light Hanukkah candles in a similar way that we go downwards. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Beis Hillel says, no, we have to rise in holiness. There's a rule, Ma'alim HaKodesh, and that's across the board. This is a rule in Torah. And we rise in holiness. We start with 1 and we go up. Now, there's a big question in this mimer. What on earth does Hanukkah have to do with the cows of Sukkot? Doesn't seem to have a connection between one and the other. I just want to skip a line here and just focus on this line. The reality is, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are not arguing about the cow thing. The Hanukkah's intrinsic connection with Sukkot, that this goes down 13, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, and Hanukkah should in theory go down 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beis Hillel agrees with that as well. But the thing is, he says that the idea of Ma'alim b'kodesh, that we rise in holiness, trumps this. And therefore we should start with 1 and go to 8. Okay, so what do we see? That there's a connection between these karbonis of Sukkot and Chanukah. What's the connection? Why is there connection? Go learn the mimer. You want to see? It's in Sefer HaMaamarim Melukot, Chelik Beis, page Yud Zayin. Okay, for those who are keeping score with the numbers and stuff. I want to point out in today's class that there actually is another connection between karbonis and Chanukah. I will tell you straight off the bat, I made up the connection. Okay, technically I didn't, but I kind of did. I decided there's a connection, but it works for the shir. The idea is like this. There are many different things we do on Chanukah. We light menorah, right? We eat latkes. We play dreidel. We sing praises to Hashem. One of the things, it's not strictly an actual minhag, but it became something that Jews do, is we eat chocolate coins. Oh, we Hanukkah gelt, that's another one, but we also have fake Hanukkah gelt, which is made of chocolate wrapped in foil. We don't eat the foil, don't do that. If you eat the foil, I don't think there's a bracha you make on that. So turns out there's actually a very big connection between carbones and chocolate. What? Okay, so let's delve into this. Where should we start? When it comes to koshering, okay, when you have something that's not kosher and you want to make it kosher, or you have something that's fleshig and you want to use it for pirate, whatever, you have to kosher it. So in general, there's two ways how to kosher a utensil, the way the Torah tells us. One way is through boiling water. It's called hagala. You take something, and you take a pot, and you fill it with water, and you heat it up, and you boil until it's a rolling boil. And if you have, let's say, a non-kosher spoon, you stick it into the pot, drop it in, and that spoon is now kosher. Okay, it's blank status. It's kosher. It can be used for whatever. That's one way of koshering. The other way of koshering is through what's called libun. Libun is through fire. Okay. That's a different kind of category, used for different things, whatever. So there's two general ways of koshering. Okay, either through water or through fire. Now, when you have a company that they want, they want to make their food that they're producing, they want it to be kosher. They want to have a kosher symbol in it, a hechsher. They are basically bringing the hechsher, the kosher agency, down to either supervise, depending on what kind of company it is, either supervise, or in addition to supervising, also to make the equipment and the food that they're producing kosher. Okay, so if they've been making something that's not kosher on their equipment, on their machinery, now they want to start making something kosher. They need to make it kosher. They need to take the equipment, and depending on what kind of equipment it is and what it was used for, it either goes through a boiling hot water process or a fire process in order to make it available to use in kosher. Yeah. You run into a very interesting issue when you're trying to make kosher chocolate. Okay? Because the way you should kosher let's say you have a chocolate factory. Okay? I'm sure there are, strictly kosher designated chocolate factories, but I think a lot of them use non-kosher companies to produce kosher chocolate. So if you have a company that's producing milk, non-kosher chocolate, because non-kosher milk is called a vacuum, it's a trait, you can't eat it. They have to make the equipment kosher. Okay, so what do? For this kind of thing, it's required is hagala. You kosher it through boiling water. The interesting issue is that the number one enemy of chocolate is water. So no chocolate company will allow, or they're very reluctant to allow any sort of water into their equipment. It can mess with the equipment. There's very sensitive equipment, and it really messes with the chocolate. The quality of it, the taste of it, the everything of it. It ruins it. So what on earth are you supposed to do? What do the kosher agencies do? How do they make the kosher chocolates? So that's what we're going to kind of get into today. So what is the connection between carbones and chocolate? We'll see in a second. So the discussion starts in the Gemara, Maseches Zvachim, Daf Tzadik Vav Amud Beis. I don't have it in front of me. I'll tell you what it says outside, more or less. It talks about if you have a copper utensil in the base of mikdash, and you put into it hot meat from certain carbones, okay, that they're eaten by the kohen or the owner maybe. Many carbones, or all carbones, I don't know the details of carbones, but they have a very interesting rule to them, a mitzvah, that you have to eat them within a certain time frame. Okay, if you wait till after that time frame, it runs into a category. The status changes. Is called nicer. Nicer means it was left over. Okay, this meat that was past the time frame, it is absolutely 100% not kosher. It's treif. You can't eat it. Okay, so when you take your kosher carbon meat, it's hot, you put it into your copper. Why use copper in the example? That's what it says in the Gemara. Again, in the Mishnah, the Chumash. Copper utensil, you put your kosher carbon meat into it, and whatever it's eaten. After that time frame, that meat, if there's anything left of it, is no longer kosher. Okay. However, if your meat was cold and you put it into your copper utensil, which is not the case, let's say in theory, no issue. Okay, whatever. The meat after the time frame runs out, the meat's not kosher, but your utensil is fine. But when you put a hot piece of meat, of carbon meat, into your copper utensil, into this bowl or plate or whatever, like any hot food, when you put it into any utensil, the utensil absorbs the taste of. This is the laws of Kashrus. It absorbs the taste of that food. In this case, it absorbs the taste of the hot carbon meat. After that time frame runs out, this utensil is no longer kosher because it absorbed the taste of the carbon, which was fine. And after the time is up, it's no longer a kosher utensil. Okay, so the Mishnah and the Gemara say that you have to kasher this, let's say a plate, okay, this copper plate. How do you need to kasher it? You need to kasher it through, it says Marika Ushtifa. You have to score it with boiling water. In other words, Hagala, what we call Hagala. Okay? The Gemara points out it has a very interesting limud. It learns something very interesting regarding this. It says, B'mayim v'loy b'yayin. You have to kasher these utensils with boiling water, not with any other liquid. The example given in the Gemara is wine. You have to use water. Okay? You can't use other liquids. And it's from here, this Gemara, that explodes a huge argument amongst the Rishonim, the later commentaries. For us, it's much earlier, but in respect of the Gemara, it's later. Mainly between these great sages known as the Rashba and the Ramban. Not the Rambam with a mem at the end, but the Ramban with a nun at the end. Okay? How do you understand this Gemara? Okay? In other words, is the Gemara only talking about karbonis, or is it a blanket statement that applies to all areas of koshering? So you have the Rashba. Okay, the Rashba is more lenient. He understands the Gemara, that the Gemara is referring only to karbonis. This rule that you can only kasher with water and not with any other liquid is some specific rule only by karbonis. Okay. For anything else, if you want to kasher a pot that was used for pork, okay, and you want to kasher it using wine, using Coca-Cola, using oil, hey, go ahead, no problem. Because this restriction of only using water is only by karbonis. Then you have the Ramban. The Ramban doesn't understand the Gemara this way. The Ramban understands that the Gemara is talking about all areas of kashering. That when it comes to kashering, it's not just by karbonis. If you want to kasher something through boiling liquid, it needs to be only water. You can't use anything else. You can't use wine, you can't use chicken soup, you can't use milk, nothing. Okay? That's the argument. The Rashba is more lenient, the Ramban is more strict. How do we rule? So interestingly, it's ruled in the laws of Pesach, in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay? So, in the Shulchan Aruch, the section of Erie Chaim, Siman Kaf Nun Beis, that's chapter 452, Halacha Hey. Okay? The Shulchan Aruch is talking about, are you allowed to kasher something using not water that was boiled through fire, but rather naturally hot water? In other words, like hot springs. Are you allowed to use such water to kasher? We're not getting into that. The Ramah throws in a line. The Ramah, who's the Ashkenazi Paisik that all the Ashkenazim follow, he writes like this: Ve'ein magilin b'shum mashke rak b'mayim. You cannot kasher with any liquid except for water. Mihu, however, b'di'eved mahani hagola b'kol mashke. After the fact, if you kasher something with any liquid, it's good enough. In other words, it seems that he's making a compromise between these two opinions, between the Rashba and the Ramban. Ideally, we rule like the Ramban. We're more strict. You can only use water. Okay, you can only use water, and that's what we do. If you come to a Rav and you say, "Hey, can I kasher my pot with chicken soup? It's a treif pot. Can I kasher it?" The Rav will tell you, "Absolutely not. You must use water. There's no way around this. You have to use water." However, if the guy, what b'di'evid, what after the fact here means, we're not going to get into details. It's going to get very complicated. We'll just keep it very simple, as if it's simple. Pretend it's simple. If you come to the Rav and you say, "Hey, I kashered my pot with chicken soup," Is that fine? The Rav will tell you, possibly. The Rav will tell you, you shouldn't have done that, but once you did it already, you're fine. It's kosher. You're good. Let's ask Rav. Yes, you should always ask Rav before you do things, not afterwards. Okay, that's the Ramah. So initially, you should only kosher with water. You can only kosher with water. After the fact, if you use any other liquid, it's good. Okay. Now, that still doesn't help with the chocolate factory, because if you need to kosher with water, which is what it says in the halacha, you have to use water. There's no way around it, seemingly. Okay? So we have, just bringing this as an example. I don't think this is a source for the idea. I think the idea is sourced actually from the Ramah, maybe even earlier. But the Rabbi Kiva Eger was a big Rav in the last 200 or so years, 150 years. I'm not a historian. So then, anyway, in the Shalos Teshuvos of Rabbi Kiva Eger, his responsa, his questions and answers. He received questions. He answered via letter. So this is Shalos Teshuvos of Kiva Eger, Simon Pei Gimel, letter number 83. So this is actually a letter to his son of Shlomo Eger. If you ever hear me tell the story about Label Eger, who was a strong opponent to Hasidim because his father was a strong opponent to Hasidim and to Hasidus, and Rabbi Label Eger ended up becoming a strong Hasid. There's a whole funny story to that. Not funny, it's an interesting story about that. I'd like to tell the story, but not getting into the story now. So the Rabbi Label Eger who became the Hasid was Rabbi Kiva Eger's grandson. Okay, so this letter is written to Rabbi Label Eger's father, who was Rabbi Kiva Eger's son, Rabbi Shlomo Eger. Okay, what was the story? So he writes, Mashkaza b'ni chavivi medina shabaliyadcha b'yescha b'molim b'ir shaloi hayu mayim esuyim gam b'balayla. Yeah, so he wrote to his father saying he was in a city. Shlomo Eger was a big rav in his own right. He was in a city, in a hotel, and at night there was no water. There was no water in the whole city. Okay, this isn't 5 years ago. This is a long while ago. There's no water. The city gate was closed. There was water, but outside the city. It wasn't helpful. What do they need water for? There were some soldiers nearby. They were cooking up a beautiful pot of pig. They wanted to eat it, and the steam from this pot, whatever, from this non-kosher contents, hit basically their only kosher pot that they were going to use to make food. Okay, so yeah, now they wanted to kasher the pot, but the problem was there was no water. So they have a treif pot, absolutely treif. You can't use it, but they need to eat, and there's no water. What are you supposed to do? He writes to his father. The father is writing what he wrote to him. He said, "You wrote to me saying that you told the people there, you told them to kasher this pot with milk, to boil up a pot of milk and kasher it that way, using the liquid called milk." Okay, fine. Rabbi Kiva Eger basically responds, "You did well. That was a good thing to say. You paskin correctly." Why? I thought it says in Shulchan Aruch that you can't use anything but water. If they went and kashered with milk and then they came, "Hey, we did this. Is that okay?" Fine. That's after the fact. There's room to say that was fine. But here, he told them to kasher with milk. What happened to the whole thing that lechatchila, initially, you can't do that. Only water. So there's an interesting rule he throws in here. To explain this, where did I see it over here? Here. Yeah, it's the middle of his discussion here. He says that although lechatchila you have to kasher it with water, you can't use any liquid. Here's the line: nevertheless, in this particular case, b'shas hadchak k'di'eved dami. There's an interesting rule that's used in halacha in different cases, different scenarios, that a pressing circumstance, a shas hadchak, is considered as if it's already after the fact. In other words, in this particular scenario where they had no food and they couldn't use water, we look at this pressing circumstances as if they had already kashered using something else, and therefore we can instruct lichatchila initially and say, go use something else besides water.
Does this make it a melchik pod?
I'm not getting into those details. Okay. That's a good question, though. Right? So Shas Atcha K'diavad Dami. This is a rule that's used very often in making halachic decisions. That a pressing circumstance can be considered as if the thing already happened. It's after the fact. So this is basically kind of what the chocolate company, the Hashgachas, relied on for a while, from my understanding. I will tell you right now, we're going to talk a little bit about what the companies actually do, what the Hashgachas actually do on the ground. I tried to research it. I did not get a lot of clarity. It's a very, almost like a mysterious topic. I don't know why. But we'll see what we come up with. Basically, back in the day, for a while, my understanding is that Hashgachas would basically, if they came to a non-kosher chocolate company, they would kasher using chocolate. They would take the chocolate run itself, that was kosher. They would produce a kosher batch, and they would melt the chocolate down, the way it's processed, and they would go through an entire run using chocolate, and the first run would absorb the non-kosher taste, so they wouldn't use it, they would throw it out. But the second run and on would be kosher, or sell it, whatever they did with it. So that was the chap. That was that was a genius idea. You can't use water. No company's going to want to use water. Use the chocolate itself. 1 second, I thought you can't use chocolate. You have to use water. So this is where the idea comes in. Shas Atcha K'diavad Dami, that it's a pressing circumstance. It's considered like after the fact. You can use chocolate. How important is chocolate? How important is somebody's livelihood that you have to cut? Okay, that's a discussion for itself. How you determine how important chocolate is. But fine. Very important. Okay. If it was this simple, there would never be any discussions about it. It's the chocolate conversation is a very, very complicated conversation. So first and foremost, we have Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Huh? No. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Where is it? It's over here somewhere. Okay. So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, this is if you're following with books, it's Igros Moshe Chelik Beis. It's really Yoreh Derech Chelik Aleph. The end of Siman Samach, the very last paragraph. So what Rabbi Moshe Feinstein basically says is that you cannot, in circumstances where you need to kasher using a liquid that's not water, where halacha allows it in certain circumstances, you cannot use shuman. Shuman is fat. You can't melt down fat and use that to kasher. Why? Because liquid fat is not really technically liquid. It's a solid. It's a solid, yes. If you leave it out and let it cool down, it is most definitely a solid. It's not a liquid. So, being that it's not really a liquid, you can't use that to kasher.
But
so,
cocoa, the chocolate has a lot of fat in it.
Yeah, so that's part of the problem. Chocolate, you melt it down, it's liquid for sure. Let it sit for a couple minutes, it's no longer liquid. Chocolate's normal status is to be a solid. So there's room to say, you can't really use chocolate to kosher the chocolate factory. Because it's not really considered a liquid. So because of this particular issue, many hashgachas, when they do kasher a chocolate factory, what I've read and what I've heard different rumors, divergent rumors, they will use oils. Not oils that solidify at room temperature, but other oils that are liquid at room temperature. I think it's sunflower oil, I think I saw, and other sort of oils. Now, all these things about the practical, I don't actually know what's true and what's not. This is what I've heard, what I read, and what I've heard from people. It's again, like I said, it's a mysterious topic. I've heard that's ridiculous. Nobody would ever kasher with oil. It's too expensive. I've heard other hashgachas will that hashgachas nowadays have more leverage, so they will actually, what do you call it? Require, and they can actually push to have them use new equipment. But I was told that it's ludicrous because that's hundreds of thousands of dollars to acquire a company just to make kosher chocolate. But whatever. I saw this. Somebody sent this to me on Thursday or Wednesday. It's an interesting write-up from a well-known Rav who's answers questions, who deals with the halachic side of one of the big hashgachis. It's a whole write-up explaining the ones who allow koshering a chocolate factory using chocolate, the basis of it. It's a very interesting write-up. I think there was something in here that I wanted to point out, but I don't remember what it was. Not sure what it was, but I have it here anyway. Regardless, so I do want to point out that the Alter Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he has the same Hilchos Pesach, and the Ramah. What did the Ramah say? The Ramah said we don't kasher with anything but water. Okay. However, diavad, after the fact, if you use other liquid, it's fine. The Alter Rebbe, when he brings this halacha, he says the same thing, but he throws in another word. It's a very interesting nuance here. He says, this is in Hilchos Pesach, Taf Nun Beis, 452, halacha number Chaf Ches. He says, Ein magilin b'shum mashke rak b'mayim, you cannot kasher, we don't kasher with any liquid besides water. There's a reason for it. Here's the wording. If you went after the fact, if you had went and used other liquids, the koshering worked. It was a good koshering after the fact. I didn't translate that literally. The literal translation was after the fact, she'avar, that you transgressed, you did something wrong, and you kasher, you didn't have liquids, the koshering worked. So there is room to say, this is actually a serious problem. This is not like just willy-nilly just throw around and say, hey, let's just kasher using other liquids. However, you must know that after the fact, if any other liquid was used, the chocolate, the equipment are totally 100% kosher. And if your chocolate has a reliable hashgacha, you can rest assured, if you trust that hashgacha, that they kashered it properly and you can rely on it. Even if they used oil, if they used chocolate, it might be a little more complicated, but I don't know if hashgachas really do that so much nowadays. I don't know. Like I said, I couldn't really find anything out. But if your kosher chocolate has good hashgacha, you can eat it. I just want to end off with this. I was looking for other things related to this, and I found this in the book called Kosher Investigator, about Rabbi Beryl Levy, who was the founder of the OK Kosher Supervision. So in the back of the book, there's a biography about him. There's a write-up here from a thing that he used to write. It was a publication called The Jewish Homemaker. And he had a write-up here about chocolate, so I'll read it because it looks interesting. He said, with chocolate, briefly, this is the story. We know there are two types of chocolate, dark chocolate and milk. To classify a product as milk chocolate, the law requires a company to use at least 12% milk in their product. In the event that they use a lesser amount, they are forbidden to call it milk chocolate and are not required to list milk as an ingredient. By the way, I just want to point in here, don't take anything he says here as solid concrete fact, because this was written in 1977. We're talking close to 50 years ago. The same applies to creamery butter. In many cases, companies use small percentages of milk or butter to make the chocolate, quote, bloom resistant, and do not list milk or butter as an ingredient. Bloom resistant means to keep the chocolate from turning gray. You ever had chocolate turns old? It becomes that's called blooming apparently. This chocolate is produced in the dark chocolate equipment, which means that the Pareve chocolate would be produced in the same equipment as the milk chocolate. The usual procedure for a changeover from milk to Pareve is to flush the equipment with cocoa butter or plain chocolate, and then produce the Pareve chocolate. And from my research on this, cocoa butter is a natural byproduct. It's a natural part of the cocoa bean. Right. After it's been processed, cocoa butter is not actually milk. It's not milk at all. Since certain equipment would be ruined if it were flushed with water, it is impossible to kosherize the equipment with water, so another method must be employed. Those who wish to eat chocolate produced according to all halachic opinions would only eat chocolate manufactured in a company that has separate equipment for pure chocolate and separate equipment for milk chocolate. There are very few such companies, and their chocolate is substantially costlier.
Wait, Rabbi, I just realized, isn't there?
This is recording, by the way. Anything you ask will be
Okay.
recorded. Okay.
I'm happy to be immortalized by YouTube. But isn't there?
If I could figure a way to get this on YouTube, I still have to figure out how to get audio onto YouTube anyway.
Yeah, isn't there like a Gemara thing? It's at the end of like Chagiga, where it's like this ruler tried to kosher a knife by like sticking it into the ground 20 times. So in theory, it's kind of the same thing. You're putting like a solid, and you're just having the blades go through the motions, and you're just like removing the like non-kosher elements of it, right?
What about the pipes?
So I mean, they all go through. Everything is running through, right? But assuming it just goes through a cycle of enough times, it's kind of like sucking out the or whatever.
So what you're talking about is nitza bakarka kosher. That's this actual way. That's regards koshering. That's basically a knife. There's a certain intensity when you're shoving it into hard ground, that does provide some sort of koshering to it. There's a whole argument in the end of Simon Kuf Chaf Aleph and Shulchan Aruch about that. It's not so straightforward, but I'll just finish the but the thing is that the chocolate is not, there's room to say that the chocolate is not halach considered a liquid. Practically it is liquid. It's when it's melted, it is liquidy. So having the blades go through it doesn't actually cause any friction, doesn't cause anything that like sticking a blade into hard ground would accomplish. Okay, fine. Have a good night. And any other further questions that you don't want on camera, so to speak, you can ask in about 4 seconds. Okay.